The strange part isn't that you fail to change. The strange part is how often you were certain that this time would be different. You made the decision with complete honesty. You cleared your schedule. You wrote down your goals. You deleted the distractions. You promised yourself that this would be the beginning of a new life. And for a while it was, you woke up earlier. You exercised. You ate better. You read more. You ignored the people who constantly pulled you down. You even started believing that maybe, just maybe, you had finally become the person you've always wanted to be. Then something happened. Not all at once. Just enough to change your direction. You skip one day. Then another. You answered a message from someone you promised yourself you'd never speak to again. You told yourself one excuse wouldn't matter. You delayed something important until tomorrow. The excitement quietly disappeared, and before you knew it, you were standing in a place that looked painfully familiar, looking at your life and wondering, how did I end up here again? Perhaps the hardest part wasn't losing progress. It was watching yourself become someone you thought you had already left behind. That moment hurts in a way very few people understand, because it makes you question something much deeper than discipline. It makes you question yourself. Maybe I'm just not consistent. Maybe I don't have enough willpower. Maybe some people are simply meant to change, and I'm not one of them. Those thoughts arrive quietly, not as loud voices, but as small conclusions repeated often enough that they begin to sound like facts. And once they settle in, they become invisible. You stop questioning them. You simply start living inside them. But tonight, I want to offer you a different possibility. What if your biggest problem isn't laziness? What if it isn't fear? What if it isn't a lack of motivation? What if something much older has been pulling the strings all along? Think about it. Have you ever noticed how strange it feels the moment life begins improving? You finally receive the opportunity you've been praying for, and suddenly you feel exhausted. You meet someone who genuinely treats you with kindness, yet part of you misses the chaos you swore you wanted to escape. You begin saving money consistently. Then out of nowhere you convince yourself to buy something you don't even need. You prepare for an important interview, and instead of practicing, you somehow spend 3 hours watching videos you never intended to watch. You tell yourself you're finally ready to become healthier, yet the night before you start, every unhealthy craving suddenly feels impossible to resist. It's almost as if something inside you whispers, let's wait one more day. Not because tomorrow is better, but because tomorrow feels safer. Most people blame these moments on weak discipline. Some call it self-sabotage. Others believe they simply weren't motivated enough. But those explanations never seem complete, because sometimes you genuinely wanted to change. You weren't pretending. You weren't lying to yourself. You meant every promise. So why did something inside you seem to fight against the very future you desired? Imagine living in a small house for 20 years. You know every squeaky floorboard, every light switch, every window that sticks during winter. It's not a perfect house. Maybe the roof leaks. Maybe the walls are cracked. Maybe you've dreamed of leaving for years. Then one day someone hands you the keys to a beautiful new home. More space, more light, more peace. You would think excitement will be the only emotion, but it isn't. Suddenly everything feels unfamiliar. You don't know where anything is. The silence feels strange. Even comfort can feel uncomfortable when you spent years surviving discomfort. The old house may have been broken, but it was known. The new house may be beautiful, but it asks your nervous system to learn an entirely different way of living. Most people think change happens in the mind. In reality, change asks the entire body to trust a future has never experienced before. And that is far more difficult than anyone admits. Because your brain doesn't wake up every morning asking one question. How can I make my life amazing? It asks something much simpler. How can I keep this person alive today? There is an enormous difference. Your brain values familiarity far more than happiness. Not because it wants you to suffer, but because familiar things have kept you alive before. If loneliness became familiar, your mind learns loneliness. If anxiety became familiar, your mind learns anxiety. If chaos surrounded your childhood, peace may eventually feel suspicious. If criticism was normal, kindness can feel almost unbelievable. Not because you dislike kindness, because your mind hasn't practiced living inside it. This explains something that confuses so many people. Sometimes success doesn't scare us because it's difficult. It scares us because it's unfamiliar. Think back to every major decision you've ever made. There was always a moment just before it happened when doubt became louder than ever. Not months before, not years before. Right before sending the application, right before publishing your work, right before leaving the toxic relationship, right before asking for the promotion, right before moving to another city. It's almost as though resistance waits until you're standing at the edge of a new life. Then suddenly, it becomes incredibly convincing. It reminds you of every mistake you've ever made, every embarrassment, every failure, every reason you should stay exactly where you are. The timing isn't random. Something inside you has learned that crossing this line means becoming someone unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels dangerous, even when it's beautiful. Have you ever noticed that people can become strangely homesick for pain? Not because pain is enjoyable, because certainty is comforting. Someone stays in a relationship that slowly destroys them because at least they know what tomorrow looks like. Someone remains in a job they hate because uncertainty feels heavier than unhappiness. Someone keeps postponing their dreams because dreaming feels safer than discovering what happens after trying. The prison becomes predictable, and predictability has a strange way of disguising itself as security. Here's something most people never realize. You don't only build habits. Habits quietly build you. Every repeated thought becomes easier to think again. Every repeated reaction becomes easier to repeat. Every story you tell yourself becomes part of the person you expect to meet in the mirror tomorrow. Without noticing, you begin protecting an identity you never consciously chose. I've always been anxious. I'm just not disciplined. I never finish what I start. I'm the kind of person who gives up. Those sentences sound harmless, but every time you repeat them, they quietly become instructions. Your mind listens. Your body follows. Your future begins arranging itself around words that were never meant to become permanent. But here's the truth that changes everything. The version of you that keeps pulling you backward isn't your enemy. It has never been your enemy. It is simply the oldest employee in your mind. It has worked every single day for years. Its only job has been to keep your world predictable. It memorized every danger, every rejection, every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment you felt abandoned, every time you failed, every promise that someone else broke. Then it quietly built rules. Don't trust too quickly. Don't dream too big. Don't become too visible. Don't expect too much. Don't risk losing what little you have. These rules were never designed to ruin your life. They were designed to protect it. The problem is, what protected yesterday can imprison tomorrow. A child who learns to stay silent in a dangerous home may become an adult who cannot speak in a room full of opportunity. Someone who learned not to ask for help may spend years carrying burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. A person who once survived by expecting disappointment may unknowingly reject hope before hope has a chance to arrive. Survival strategies often outlive the emergencies that created them, and when they do, they begin protecting us from lives we are finally ready to live. Maybe that's why change feels so exhausting. Not because you're building someone entirely new, but because you're gently asking someone very old inside you to loosen their grip. Imagine walking through a forest you crossed every day for years. The path is clear because you've walked it thousands of times. Then one morning you decide to create a new path. The first step feels awkward. The second feels unnatural. The branches push back. The ground resists your feet. Meanwhile, the old trail seems to invite you home. Not because it's better, because it's already built. Every decision you make either clears the new path or strengthens the old one. And somewhere deep inside, your old self watches quietly, not with anger, not with hatred, but with concern. It wonders why you're leaving the only world it has ever known. It cannot yet see the life waiting beyond the trees. Only you can. And that is why the next part of this journey matters so much. Because before you can become someone new, you must first understand a quiet voice that keeps asking you to become who you used to be. In the next chapter, We're going to meet that voice, not to silence it, not to fight it, but to finally understand why it has been holding on so tightly, and why the closer you get to real change, the harder it tries to bring you home. Chapter 1. The invisible contract you never knew you signed. There's a quiet moment that almost everyone overlooks. It doesn't happen when life falls apart. It doesn't happen after failure. It happens much earlier. It happens the first time you decide who you need to become in order to feel safe. You were never handed a piece of paper. No one asked for your signature. Yet somewhere between childhood and adulthood, you entered into an invisible contract. Without realizing it, you began making silent promises to yourself. If I stay quiet, people won't reject me. If I never ask for too much, I won't be disappointed. If I make everyone happy, they'll stay. If I don't stand out, I won't be criticized. At first, these promises were incredibly useful. They helped you survive confusing situations. They reduced pain. They gave your world a sense of order. But survival has a strange habit. It rarely tells you when its job is finished. Years later, those same promises continue running your life, even though the danger they were created to solve disappeared long ago. That is why changing your life often feels like breaking a promise. Not a promise you consciously made, a promise you forgot existed. This explains something many people secretly carry. Have you ever noticed how guilty you can feel after doing something completely healthy? You finally tell someone no. Instead of feeling empowered, you feel selfish. You ask for the salary you deserve. Instead of feeling confident, you feel uncomfortable. You decide to spend a quiet weekend resting. Instead of feeling peaceful, you feel lazy. Nothing bad actually happened. Yet your emotions behave as though you've done something terribly wrong. Why? Because emotions don't always respond to reality. They often respond to old agreements. If your younger self learned that saying yes kept people close, then saying no later in life feels like breaking a sacred rule. Not because it is wrong, because your nervous system remembers a world that no longer exists. Think about someone who always apologizes, not just when they've made a mistake. They apologize for asking questions, for taking up space, for speaking too long, for needing help, for existing in ways that inconvenience no one. To an outside observer, it makes little sense. But inside that person's mind, apologizing became a way of keeping peace. Somewhere long ago, they learned that making themselves smaller reduced conflict. Their apology isn't really about today's conversation. It's about yesterday's survival. The past has an incredible ability to disguise itself as the present. That disguise is so convincing that most people never notice it. A simple comment from a coworker suddenly feels devastating. One unanswered text message creates hours of anxiety. A tiny mistake at work feels like the end of the world. The event itself isn't carrying all that weight. It has awakened something much older. It's as though every painful memory has been quietly stored inside a room you rarely enter. Then one ordinary moment accidentally opens a door. Suddenly you're not reacting to one conversation. You're reacting to years. That explains why two people can experience exactly the same situation and walk away with completely different emotions. One receives criticism and calmly improves. The other spends the entire night replaying every word. One enters a crowded room with curiosity. The other immediately searches for signs of rejection. The world remained the same. Their invisible contracts were different. One of the greatest misunderstandings about personal growth is believing that confidence means never feeling afraid. Real confidence often looks much quieter. It is the willingness to disappoint an old version of yourself. That sentence deserves to stay with you, because every meaningful change disappoints the identity that depended on your old patterns. When you stop chasing people who ignore you, an older part of you wonders why you're no longer fighting for love. When you stop proving your worth, an older part of you worries you'll become invisible. When you finally rest without guilt, an older part of you becomes restless because exhaustion once felt like proof that you deserve success. The old self doesn't measure progress the way you do. It measures familiarity. That is why unfamiliar peace can feel strangely uncomfortable. A man spends 20 years working 12-hour days. Eventually, he reaches financial freedom. One afternoon, he sits quietly on his porch with nothing urgent to do. Instead of enjoying the moment, he feels anxious, he starts checking emails, looking for problems, creating new work. From the outside, people think he's addicted to productivity, but something deeper is happening. His identity learned that constant effort meant safety. Stillness now feels dangerous. His calendar changed. His nervous system didn't. Or think about a woman who finally leaves a relationship that drained her for years. Her friends celebrate. Her family feels relieved. Yet weeks later, she finds herself missing the very person who caused her pain. She doesn't miss the suffering. She misses the certainty. Her emotions haven't caught up with reality. Her old contract whispers, "At least you knew what tomorrow looked like." There's an important difference between what feels familiar and what feels right. Many people spend decades confusing the two. Children learn familiarity long before they learn wisdom. Your mind was designed to predict. Prediction helped your ancestors survive. When they recognized familiar sounds in the forest, they lived another day. Today, your brain still prefers prediction, except the forests have changed. Now, the danger isn't usually hiding behind trees. It's hiding inside expectations. Predictable disappointment often feels safer than unpredictable happiness. That sounds irrational until you notice it in your own life. Some people expect relationships to fail, so they leave first. Some expect opportunities to disappear, so they never fully commit. Some expect success to change other people's opinion of them, so they quietly sabotage themselves before success arrives. Not because they enjoy losing, because losing matches a story they rehearsed for years. Stories become powerful through repetition, not through truth. If you repeat something often enough, your mind eventually stops asking whether it's accurate. It simply assumes it's useful. I've never been disciplined. I'm bad with money. I'm unlucky. I always choose the wrong people. I'm just an anxious person. Notice how absolute those statements sound. There is no room for change, no possibility, only identity. Your brain loves identity because identity simplifies decisions. Once you believe, "I'm not someone who finishes projects," quitting becomes effortless. You're simply acting consistently with who you believe you are. The frightening part is that identities rarely arrive all at once. They accumulate one ordinary day at a time. One embarrassment, one failure, one rejection, one careless comment from someone you respected. A teacher says you're not creative. Years later, you still hesitate before sharing ideas. A parent constantly tells you to stop dreaming. As an adult, ambition feels embarrassing. A friend laughs at your excitement. Gradually, enthusiasm begins hiding behind caution. Tiny moments, lifelong consequences. Not because those moments were powerful by themselves, because you believe them. Belief is one of the quietest architects of destiny. It builds invisible rooms inside your mind. Eventually, you stop noticing the walls. Have you ever watched an elephant tied with a thin rope? People often wonder why such a powerful animal doesn't simply walk away. The answer isn't physical. When it was young, the rope truly could hold it. After enough unsuccessful attempts to escape, it stopped trying. Years later, the rope remains. The strength has changed. The belief hasn't. Many adults carry invisible ropes, not because they lack ability, because they stopped testing old conclusions. I can't speak in public. I'll never change. People like me don't succeed. These aren't facts. They're ropes. The most remarkable thing about invisible ropes is that they never tighten themselves. We do. Every time we obey them, without questioning them. Every time we avoid discomfort simply because it feels unfamiliar. Every time we mistake fear for truth. Here's something quietly beautiful. Your old self doesn't actually know your future. It only knows your history. It predicts tomorrow using yesterday's evidence. That's all it has. When you begin changing, you're asking it to make predictions using experiences it has never seen before. Of course it hesitates. If someone had only ever seen winter, they would struggle to believe spring exists. Not because spring isn't real, because they've never lived through it. The old self isn't resisting possibility. It's lacking evidence. And evidence only appears after action. This is why waiting until you feel completely ready rarely works. Readiness often follows movement, not the other way around. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. No amount of reading teaches balance. Balance appears while moving, awkwardly, unsteadily, one wobble after another. Personal growth follows the same rhythm. Your confidence isn't built before the journey. It quietly grows while you're already walking. This changes how you see fear. Perhaps fear isn't always saying, "Don't go." Perhaps it's sometimes saying, "I've never been here before." There's an enormous difference. One asks you to stop. The other simply admits uncertainty. Your old self often speaks uncertainty in the language of danger. That translation error has kept millions of people standing still. A musician delays sharing their songs. An entrepreneur delays launching a business. A writer rewrites the first page for 3 years. A student delays applying for a dream opportunity. None of them lack talent. Many simply mistake unfamiliarity for catastrophe. And the longer they wait, the more convincing the fear becomes. Because inactivity has its own strange comfort. It protects hope. As long as you never try, you never have to discover what happens. The dream stays perfect. Reality remains untested. Yet hidden beneath every postponed decision is a silent cost. The life you could have lived waits patiently while your old identity negotiates with possibilities it cannot control. Days become months. Months become years. One morning, people wake up wondering where the time disappeared. Time rarely disappears. It quietly follows the beliefs we refuse to question. There comes a moment, though, when something unexpected begins to happen. The old contract starts showing tiny cracks. You notice yourself pausing before automatically saying yes. You question the voice that tells you you're not enough. You recognize familiar fear without immediately obeying it. These moments seem insignificant. They aren't. A tree doesn't fall because of the final crack. It falls because thousands of tiny fractures weaken what once appeared unbreakable. The same is true of identity. Long before your life changes on the outside, something begins shifting where no one else can see. Not your habits, not your circumstances, your relationship with the voice you believed your entire life. And once that relationship changes, an unsettling question quietly appears. If that voice isn't telling the whole truth, then who exactly has been making my decisions all these years? Chapter 2. The Comfort of Becoming Predictable. There is something the mind values more than happiness, more than success, even more than confidence. It values knowing what comes next. This is why you can walk into the same room every day without thinking about where the light switch is. You don't need to stop and calculate each step. Your body already knows. Your mind has turned repetition into certainty. That same process quietly shapes your entire life. Not only your routines, not only your habits, but your emotions, your relationships, your ambitions, even the way you speak to yourself. The human mind is constantly asking one silent question. What usually happens after this? If someone compliments you, what usually happens next? If you fail, what usually happens next? If you fall in love, what usually happens next? If you try something difficult, what usually happens next? Your answers to those questions may never be spoken aloud, yet they guide thousands of decisions every single day. Perhaps that explains why two people can receive the exact same opportunity and respond in completely different ways. One feels excited. The other feels suspicious. One sees possibility. The other prepares for disappointment. Neither response is random. Both are predictions built from countless yesterdays. There is an old gardener who plants seeds every spring. He never digs them up the next morning to check if they are growing. He waters them, protects them, waits. Year after year, the garden rewards his patience. Across town, another man decides to grow his own garden. But every evening he becomes anxious. He digs up the seeds to see whether roots have appeared. He keeps moving them to different places. He changes the soil every few days. He cannot understand why nothing survives. Both men want flowers. Only one has learned to trust what cannot yet be seen. Many people treat personal growth the way the second man treats his garden. They begin exercising. 3 days later they ask, "Why don't I feel different?" They start therapy. 2 weeks later they wonder, "Why am I still thinking the same way?" They begin building a business. After one setback, they decide, maybe I'm not made for this. They mistake slow growth for no growth. Yet some of the most important changes happen beneath the surface, where the eyes cannot follow. A tree spends years strengthening its roots before anyone admires its height. The mind often works the same way. What looks like nothing may actually be preparation. That is difficult to accept in a world obsessed with immediate results. We celebrate dramatic transformations, before and after photos, overnight success stories, instant breakthroughs. But real change is usually much quieter. It often hides inside ordinary days. A different response during an argument, 5 extra minutes of concentration, walking away from gossip, closing the phone instead of opening another app, choosing honesty instead of comfort. These moments rarely feel extraordinary, yet they slowly reshape the person making them. There's another reason change feels invisible at first. Your brain is remarkably efficient. Whenever it discovers something that works, it tries to automate it. That is a gift. Otherwise, brushing your teeth would require the same effort every morning as learning to drive a car. Efficiency saves energy, but efficiency has a shadow. The brain does not carefully separate useful patterns from harmful ones. It simply repeats what has been repeated before. Worry can become automatic. Avoidance can become automatic. People-pleasing can become automatic. Even loneliness can become automatic. One day you wake up believing, this is just who I am. Yet, what feels like personality is often practiced familiarity. There's a violinist who has played the same song for 20 years. His fingers move before he consciously thinks. Now, place a new piece of music in front of him. Suddenly, he hesitates. He slows down. He makes mistakes. No one watching would conclude he has forgotten how to play the violin. They understand something else. Learning temporarily looks worse than mastery. Growth almost always looks awkward before it looks graceful. The same is true when becoming a different person. At first, kindness feels unnatural if criticism has always been your language. Confidence feels forced if self-doubt has been your companion. Rest feels uncomfortable if busyness has become your identity. You mistake unfamiliarity for failure, but awkwardness is often evidence that your mind is creating new pathways instead of walking the old ones. Think about learning another language. At first, you translate every sentence in your head. You search for words. You hesitate. Conversations feel exhausting. Months later, something changes. Without noticing, you begin thinking in the new language. What once required enormous effort now feels natural. Your personality did not suddenly improve. Your repetitions quietly rewired what felt familiar. Your inner life changes exactly the same way. The thoughts you practice become the thoughts that arrive first. This is why one small decision deserves more attention than it usually receives. The decision to pause. Most people think their lives are controlled by big choices. Where to live, who to marry, which career to pursue. Those choices matter. But hidden beneath them are thousands of tiny pauses. Someone criticizes you. Pause. You feel rejected. Pause. You want to quit. Pause. You feel the urge to send that message you know you'll regret. Pause. Within those tiny spaces lives a freedom many people never discover. Without a pause, old patterns complete the sentence before you even realize it began. With a pause, something remarkable becomes possible. You notice, not react. Notice. That difference is subtle, yet entire lives are shaped by it. A sailor cannot control the wind, but he can notice it before adjusting the sails. Someone who never notices simply drifts wherever the current decides. The pause is not weakness. It is awareness arriving before habit. Perhaps that explains why some of the wisest people appear surprisingly calm. It is not because they experience fewer emotions. It is because they have learned that emotions are visitors, not commanders. A wave can rise without carrying you away. A thought can appear without becoming a decision. A memory can return without becoming your future. This changes your relationship with yourself. Instead of saying, I am anxious, you quietly notice, anxiety is visiting. Instead of saying, I am a failure, you notice, I am having a thought about failure. One sentence becomes an identity. The other becomes an observation. That small difference creates enormous freedom. Clouds pass across the sky every day. No one believes the sky has disappeared. Thoughts deserve the same patience. Not every dark thought deserves your loyalty. Some are simply passing weather. Still, there is something that surprises almost everyone. The moment you begin creating healthier patterns, your old patterns often become louder, not weaker, louder. Someone decides to stop scrolling endlessly. Suddenly, the phone feels irresistible. Someone chooses healthier food. Suddenly, every advertisement seems to feature desserts. Someone commits to waking up early. Suddenly, the bed feels softer than ever before. It almost feels unfair. Yet there is a simple reason. You only notice noise once silence begins. A refrigerator hums all day without your attention. Turn it off. Only then do you realize it was there. Old habits become obvious precisely because you have stopped living inside them unconsciously. Awareness makes invisible things visible. That visibility is progress, not failure. A child learning to ride a bicycle wobbles less because balance has improved. An adult changing lifelong emotional patterns often feels more unstable at first because awareness has increased. You begin seeing what was always happening. That can feel overwhelming. Yet clarity often arrives before peace. There's a craftsman restoring an old wooden table. The first thing he does is not apply polish. He sands away years of paint. Dust fills the room. The table temporarily looks worse. Anyone walking past might think he has ruined it. Only the craftsman understands what is happening. The beauty was never being created. It was being uncovered. Perhaps that is true for you as well. You may not be building a completely different person. You may be uncovering someone who has been buried beneath years of automatic reactions. That possibility changes everything, because it means your deepest qualities may not need to be invented, only remembered. Patience, curiosity, courage, peace, compassion. These are often hidden beneath layers of fear rather than absent altogether. The world constantly tells you to become more. Life quietly invites you to remove what no longer belongs. There's a profound difference. One creates endless pressure. The other creates relief. The first asks, what else must I add before I become enough? The second whispers, what if I have been carrying things that were never mine? Perhaps not every insecurity belongs to you. Perhaps not every fear began with you. Perhaps not every belief deserves to follow you into tomorrow. Some burdens feel personal simply because you've carried them for so long. Yet, carrying something for years does not make it part of your identity. A traveler who wears a heavy backpack for months may eventually forget what walking freely feels like. The weight becomes normal. Only after setting it down does the body remember its natural rhythm. Many people are exhausted not because life demands too much, but because they have forgotten which emotional weight was never theirs to carry in the first place. And when that forgotten truth begins to surface, another question quietly waits beneath it. If so much of your life has been shaped by what became familiar, then whose voice first taught you what normal was supposed to feel like? Chapter 3. The memory your body refuses to forget. There is a kind of memory that does not live in your thoughts. You cannot see it. You cannot reason with it. Sometimes you cannot even explain it. Yet it quietly shapes your life every single day. It lives in a way your shoulders tighten before you enter a difficult conversation. It lives in a hesitation before you introduce yourself to someone new. It lives in the deep breath you take before opening an email you've been avoiding. It lives in a way your stomach suddenly feels heavy when your phone rings with a certain person's name. You may tell yourself, I'm fine. Your body quietly replies, I remember. That is one of the strangest truths about being human. Your mind can move into the future long before your body believes it is safe to follow. That is why someone can leave a painful relationship and still feel nervous every time their phone vibrates. That is why someone who grew up constantly criticized may feel tense whenever a boss simply says, Can we talk? Nothing bad has happened, but something familiar has been awakened. The body is not predicting the future. It is replaying unfinished history. Most people believe memory is like a bookshelf. Events happen. They are stored. Then you take them out whenever you want to remember. Real life is much stranger. Memory behaves more like perfume. You don't have to see it for it to fill the room. One familiar smell, one familiar street, one familiar song. Suddenly, you are not just remembering the past. You are feeling it. Your heartbeat changes. Your breathing changes. Your posture changes. Without asking permission, your entire body begins living inside a moment that no longer exists. That is why healing cannot happen only through thinking differently. If thinking alone solved everything, nobody would struggle with fear after understanding it. Nobody would know smoking is harmful and continue smoking. Nobody would promise to stop procrastinating and still delay the work they care about most. Information changes the mind. Experience changes the body. And until both begin working together, change always feels incomplete. There was a young pianist who practiced on an old wooden piano every afternoon. For years, one particular key stuck whenever she pressed it. Eventually, she learned to strike that key harder than every other note. It became automatic. Years later, she bought a beautiful grand piano. Every key worked perfectly, yet she continued hitting that same note too hard. Not because the piano required it, because her hands remember a problem that no longer existed. That is how many people live. They continue protecting themselves from situations that disappeared years ago. Someone continues apologizing before speaking. Someone keeps expecting betrayal from people who have never betrayed them. Someone refuses compliments because praise once came with hidden conditions. Someone laughs whenever they feel uncomfortable because sadness was never welcomed. The situation changed. The body didn't receive the update. There is a difference between remembering something and reliving it. Many people unknowingly do the second. Notice what happens when someone asks about an embarrassing moment from years ago. You may feel your face become warm. Your heart beats a little faster. Perhaps you even look away. Your body reacts as though the embarrassment is happening now. The event is gone. The experience briefly returns. That is because your nervous system speaks a different language than your thinking mind. It speaks through sensation, through rhythm, through repetition, through emotion. It asks one question above all others. Is this familiar? If the answer is yes, your body often responds before your thoughts even catch up. Have you ever reached for your phone without deciding to? You simply found it in your hand. That wasn't laziness. It wasn't weakness. It was familiarity completing a sentence your awareness never heard begin. The same thing happens emotionally. Someone raises their voice. You shrink. Someone disagrees with you. You begin defending yourself before they've even finished speaking. Someone becomes distant. You immediately assume you've done something wrong. The body is astonishingly fast. It would rather react quickly than accurately. Thousands of years ago, that speed helped humans survive. Today, it often keeps old emotional patterns alive. There's an elderly carpenter who built furniture for nearly 50 years. One day, an apprentice asked him how he always cut perfectly straight lines. The carpenter smiled. I stopped measuring with my eyes many years ago. What do you measure with? The apprentice asked. My hands. His hands had repeated the same movement so many times that accuracy became part of him. Your emotional life works exactly the same way. Every repeated reaction becomes easier to repeat, not because it is correct, because it has become efficient. Efficiency is one of the brain's favorite shortcuts. It prefers familiar roads over better roads, even when the familiar road leads somewhere painful. This explains why change often feels exhausting in the beginning. You are not only choosing differently, you are asking your body to travel a road it has rarely taken. That requires energy. A person who has driven the same route to work for 10 years barely notices the turns anymore. Take a different road. Suddenly, every intersection demands attention. Personal growth feels tiring for the same reason. Awareness requires effort. Automatic behavior does not. That effort often tricks people into believing they are failing. I'm overthinking. I'm making everything harder. No wonder I keep going back. But perhaps what feels difficult is actually evidence that your mind is awake instead of asleep. The old route was effortless because you no longer had to choose it. You simply followed it. Freedom asks more from you in the beginning, not forever. Only until the unfamiliar becomes familiar. There is something beautifully hopeful about that, because it means peace can become automatic too. Kindness can become automatic. Confidence can become automatic. Calm can become automatic, not through wishing, through repetition. Every life is quietly shaped by rehearsals. A violinist rehearses music. An athlete rehearses movement. A speaker rehearses words. Without realizing it, many people rehearse fear. Every morning they rehearse worst-case scenarios. Every evening they replay conversations they wish had gone differently. Before every opportunity, they rehearse rejection. The brain becomes remarkably good at whatever it practices. It does not judge the content, only the frequency. If you spend years rehearsing disappointment, hope begins to feel like a foreign language. Not because hope is unrealistic, because disappointment has become fluent. Think about a path through a field. Walk across the grass once. Very little changes. Walk the same path every day for 5 years. Soon there is no grass at all. The earth itself begins guiding your feet. Thoughts leave trails exactly the same way. The first time you doubt yourself, it is only a thought. After thousands of repetitions, it becomes the easiest path your mind knows how to take. That is why one encouraging sentence rarely changes a lifetime of self-criticism. The old path has been walked too many times. Yet there is another truth hidden inside that realization. New paths can also be created, not overnight, not through force, through footsteps, again and again, a little farther each day. Most people underestimate how quietly transformation happens. They expect fireworks. Instead, it usually arrives like sunrise. You rarely notice the exact moment darkness becomes light. Yet, one minute the world looks different. The same happens inside you. One day you notice that criticism no longer ruins your afternoon. You notice that silence no longer makes you anxious. You notice that saying no longer fills you with guilt. You cannot identify the exact day those changes happened, because real transformation often whispers before it speaks. There was a woman who carried an old leather suitcase everywhere she went. It belonged to her father. Inside were newspapers, broken tools, faded photographs, and things no one had touched in decades. People constantly asked why she carried something so heavy. She always answered the same way. I've always carried it. One afternoon, someone gently asked a different question. What inside the suitcase still belongs to you? She opened it for the first time in years. Most of what she carried had never been hers. Many people are living exactly like that. They carry other people's fears, other people's expectations, other people's definitions of success, other people's shame, other people's disappointments. Because they picked them up so early, they mistake them for their own. The weight feels personal simply because it has been present for so long. Children absorb far more than instructions. They absorb atmosphere. If a home constantly felt tense, the body learns tension. If affection disappeared without warning, the body learns uncertainty. If achievement earned love, while failure earns silence, the body quietly connects worth with performance. Nobody sits a child down and explains these lessons. The child simply lives inside them until they become invisible truths. Years later, adulthood arrives. The scenery changes. The lessons remain. A partner forgets to reply. For a few hours, the body whispers, "They're leaving." A manager offers constructive feedback. The body whispers, "You're failing." A friend cancels dinner. The body whispers, "You don't matter." These whispers feel like intuition. Often they are simply echoes. Echoes sound convincing because they resemble a real voice. But they do not come from the present. They come from somewhere much farther away. Learning to recognize echoes may be one of the most life-changing skills a person can develop, not because every fear is false. Some fears deserve attention, but many deserve investigation before obedience. There is a lighthouse standing on a rocky coast. Its purpose is to warn ships of danger. For generations, it worked perfectly. Then one day the shoreline changed after a powerful storm. The rocks moved, the water deepened, yet the lighthouse continued flashing exactly where danger used to be. Ships that followed its warning now avoided perfectly safe water. The lighthouse wasn't broken. It was outdated. Many emotional alarms operate the same way. They continue warning you about dangers that no longer exist. You feel panic before speaking up, not because speaking is dangerous, because once, long ago, it was, you feel guilty resting, not because rest is wrong, because once your value depended on constant effort, your alarm system may be sincere without being accurate. That distinction changes everything. Most people spend years trying to silence their emotional alarms. Perhaps the wiser approach is to gently update them, not with force, with evidence. Every time you survive an honest conversation, your body gathers new evidence. Every time someone respects your boundaries instead of abandoning you, your body gathers new evidence. Every time you make a mistake without losing your worth, your body gathers new evidence. Evidence is what slowly teaches the nervous system that today is not yesterday. Words alone rarely accomplish that. Life does. Repeat it often enough, patiently enough. There's another hidden layer beneath all this, one that surprises almost everyone. Your body does not only remember pain, it also remembers safety. Think about the feeling of sitting beside someone who truly listens. Notice how your breathing changes. Your shoulders soften. Time seems slower. Nothing dramatic happened. No lottery was won. No life-changing announcement arrived. Your body simply recognized safety. That means your nervous system is not your enemy. It is always learning, always updating, always asking, what should I expect from the world now? That question is never fully answered. Every conversation contributes, every boundary, every act of courage, every moment of self-respect. Little by little, your body begins believing what your mind has been trying to tell it for years. Perhaps I really am safe. Perhaps I don't have to earn every ounce of love. Perhaps peace isn't something I visit. Perhaps it can become where I live. That possibility changes the direction of an entire life. Because once the body begins trusting safety, something unexpected starts happening. You stop fighting yourself every morning. Your energy is no longer spent escaping invisible dangers. It becomes available for creating, for loving, for building, for becoming. And then, almost quietly, another mystery begins to reveal itself. If your body has been faithfully carrying memories that are no longer true, what other hidden forces have been shaping your life without ever asking for your permission? Chapter 4. The person you become when no one is watching. There's a version of you that almost nobody knows. Not your family, not your closest friends, not the people you work with, not even the person who claims to know you best. It only appears in the quiet moments, when the room is empty, when there is no audience, when no one is waiting for an explanation. That version of you quietly decides whether you will keep your promise or break it, whether you will tell yourself the truth or another comforting story, whether you will stay with a difficult work or reach for another distraction. Most people believe their life is shaped by the decisions they make in public. The promotion, the wedding, the move to a new city, the business they start, the degree they earn. Those moments matter, but they are not where your future is built. Your future is built in the invisible conversations you have with yourself when nobody else can hear them. There's a man who dreams of running a marathon. He tells everyone. He buys expensive shoes. He posts motivational quotes. He watches videos about discipline. Every morning he proudly announces that this will be the year he transforms his life. Across town, another man says nothing. Before sunrise, he quietly puts on an old pair of shoes. He runs while the streets are still empty. Some mornings he feels motivated. Some mornings he does not. He runs anyway. Months later, only one of them crosses the finish line. The difference was never information. Both knew how to train. The difference was what happened when no one was there to applaud. There is something deeply fascinating about human nature. We often perform for other people, but we negotiate with ourselves. You would never promise a friend that you will meet them at 6 o'clock and then casually decide not to show up every other day. Eventually, they would stop trusting you. Yet many people make promises to themselves every single morning and quietly break them every evening. Tomorrow I will start. Tomorrow I will be different. Tomorrow I will stop making excuses. Tomorrow I will finally believe in myself. Then tomorrow arrives. The promise disappears. A new promise takes its place. This happens so often that something invisible begins to change. Not your schedule, not your opportunities, your self-trust. Trust is not built because someone says the right words. It is built because their actions become predictable. The same is true inside your own mind. Every promise you keep sends one quiet message. I can rely on myself. Every promise you repeatedly abandon sends another. My words don't mean much. That message is rarely spoken aloud. It settles much deeper than language. Think about an old bridge crossing a river. Every day, thousands of people walk across it without thinking. Not because they inspect every piece of steel. They trust it. That trust was earned slowly. Year after year. Storm after storm. Wait after wait. Now think about your relationship with yourself. When life becomes difficult, can your mind trust that you will stay? Can it trust that you will tell the truth? Can it trust that you will act according to your values instead of your emotions? Or has it learned that difficult moments usually end with retreat? This is not a question of shame. It is a question of evidence. Your mind keeps a quiet record of your behavior, not to punish you, to predict you. That prediction becomes your identity. Most people spend years trying to become more confident. Confidence is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the memory of surviving uncertainty before. Think about a child learning to swim. The first time they enter deep water, every movement feels uncertain. They cling to the edge. Their breathing becomes shallow. Weeks later, something changes. The water did not become less deep. The child became more familiar with floating. Confidence was not delivered. It was accumulated, one experience at a time. Many adults are waiting to feel confident before taking action. Life usually works in reverse. Action quietly gathers the evidence that confidence later uses. There's another hidden reason why change feels so fragile. Your attention has become one of the most valuable things you own, yet very few people guard it carefully. Think about walking through a crowded marketplace. Every seller is calling your name. Every voice claims to offer something you need. Every colorful sign competes for your eyes. If you stopped at every stall, you would never reach your destination. Modern life often feels exactly like that, except the marketplace now fits inside your pocket. One notification, one message, one headline, one short video, another, and another. None of them seem powerful by themselves. Yet together, they quietly train your mind to expect interruption. This creates a strange problem. Deep change requires long conversations with yourself. Distraction keeps interrupting them. There was once a sculptor who spent years creating statues from enormous blocks of marble. A visitor asked him how he knew what carve. The sculptor smiled. "I don't create the statue." "What do you mean?" the visitor asked. "I simply remove everything that doesn't belong." That answer stayed with the visitor for the rest of his life. Perhaps personal growth is less about becoming someone else and more about removing what constantly interrupts who you already are. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves your time. Attention is like sunlight. Whatever receives it begins to grow. If resentment receives your attention every day, resentment grows. If comparison receives your attention every day, comparison grows. If gratitude receives your attention, something quieter begins growing too. Your attention is constantly casting votes for the person you are becoming. Yet there is something even more subtle. Attention is not only directed outward, it also points inward. Listen carefully to the way you speak to yourself after making a mistake. That voice reveals more than you realize. Some people spill a cup of coffee and quietly laugh. Others make the exact same mistake and immediately whisper, "I'm so stupid." One event, two completely different relationships with the self. Over time, those private conversations become emotional climates. Some people live inside constant criticism. Others live inside patient correction. The difference shapes everything. A wise craftsman does not throw away his tools because one project goes wrong. He sharpens them, adjusts them, learns from them. Many people offer more patience to broken furniture than they offer themselves. A single mistake becomes evidence that they are failing. One difficult week becomes proof that they lack discipline. One rejection becomes confirmation that they are not enough. But life rarely speaks in permanent sentences. It usually speaks in temporary moments. Only we insist on turning moments into identities. There's an old watchmaker who spends hours repairing delicate mechanical watches. His apprentice once asked why he never seemed frustrated when a tiny spring slipped from his hands. The old man smiled without looking up. "If I become angry every time something small goes wrong," he said, "my hands stop being steady enough to fix it." There's profound wisdom hidden inside those words. Your emotional state often determines the quality of your next decision, not because emotions control reality, because they influence what you notice. An anxious mind sees threats. An impatient mind sees delays. A grateful mind notices opportunities that were already there. The world changes less often than the lens through which you observe it. There is another trap that quietly keeps people attached to their old selves. They confuse intensity with importance. A dramatic decision feels meaningful. Quiet consistency feels ordinary. Someone announces a complete life transformation. They throw away everything in the kitchen, wake up at 4 in the morning, buy new clothes, create complicated routines, tell everyone that everything is changing. 2 weeks later, exhaustion quietly replaces excitement. Meanwhile, another person changes one tiny behavior. They go to bed 15 minutes earlier. They write one honest page every morning. They take one walk each evening. No announcement, no performance. Months later, their entire life begins looking different. The river carves through stone, not because of force, because of persistence. Your old self loves dramatic promises. They feel exciting. Your new self quietly prefers reliable actions. They feel almost invisible. The world celebrates breakthroughs. Life is usually transformed by repetitions. There's a reason ancient trees survive powerful storms. Their strength is not only above the ground. It extends far below where nobody applauds. People often ask how to become mentally stronger. Perhaps a better question is this: what quiet actions are teaching your mind that you can be trusted? Making your bed when no one will see it. Finishing the page even when inspiration disappears. Leaving your phone in another room for 1 hour. Speaking honestly when lie would be easier. Keeping one promise to yourself each day. Tiny actions, invisible victories. Yet each one quietly rewrites your relationship with yourself. The world often misunderstands discipline. It imagines someone forcing themselves through life with clenched teeth. Real discipline often feels gentler. It is simply reducing the number of arguments you have with yourself. When the decision has already been made, there is nothing left to negotiate. The sun does not debate whether it should rise. The seasons do not ask whether they feel motivated. Nature quietly follows its rhythm. There's peace inside that kind of consistency, not because it is exciting, because it removes unnecessary conflict. Many people wake up every morning and begin negotiating immediately. Should I exercise? Should I write? Should I study? Should I call them? Should I keep my promise? By the time the day truly begins, much of their energy has already been spent deciding. Eventually they become tired, not from work, but from endless negotiation. The strongest people are not always those with the greatest willpower. Often they are simply the ones who make fewer decisions against themselves. There's another quiet truth waiting beneath all of this. The person you become is always watching the person you are today, not with judgment, with curiosity. Every small act answers a silent question. Can I trust you to build the life we're hoping for? The answer is never given through words. It is given through repetition, through ordinary mornings, through forgotten afternoons, through evenings when no one would know if you stopped trying. That is where identities quietly change, not under bright lights, but inside ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. One day those moments become years. Those years become character. That character becomes destiny. And then something unexpected begins to happen. You no longer feel as though you are forcing yourself to become someone new. Instead, it feels as though someone has been patiently waiting beneath all the noise, finally stepping forward without asking for permission. But if that quieter version of you has always been there, who has been speaking so loudly all this time? Chapter 5. Why your mind protects the life you secretly want to leave. There's a strange moment that almost everyone experiences, but very few people understand. It happens when life finally begins to improve. The opportunity arrives. The relationship becomes healthier. The business starts growing. The weight begins coming off. People start noticing your work. The future you have imagined for years quietly moves within reach. Then, almost without warning, something inside you begins pulling in the opposite direction. You suddenly feel tired. Small problems feel enormous. Simple decisions become complicated. The excitement that carried you this far quietly disappears. You tell yourself you need a break. You convince yourself the timing isn't right. You begin questioning dreams that felt absolutely certain only a week ago. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it feels completely reasonable. That is because your mind is solving a problem you cannot yet see. Most people believe they fear failure. Failure is painful. Failure is embarrassing. Failure can delay our dreams. But failure has something surprisingly comforting. It is familiar. If you spent years doubting yourself, failing simply confirms what your old identity already expected. Success creates a very different problem. Success asks you to become someone you have never been before. And that uncertainty often feels heavier than disappointment. Think about a man who has lived in the same small town for his entire life. He knows every street, every shortcut, every neighbor. He can walk home with his eyes closed. One day, he receives an incredible job offer in another country. Better pay, better opportunities, a completely different future. Everyone congratulates him. Yet that night, he barely sleeps. Not because the opportunity is bad, because the map inside his mind suddenly disappears. He no longer knows where anything is. His future has become unfamiliar. The human mind loves maps, not because maps are exciting, because they reduce uncertainty. Your old identity is a map. It tells you who you are, what people expect from you, what you should fear, what you should avoid, how much happiness feels acceptable, how much success feels safe. Whether those instructions are true hardly matters. The mind prefers an old map to no map at all. That explains why so many people remain inside lives they have already outgrown, not because they enjoy them, because they know how to survive there. There's a woman who spends years working at a job she quietly dislikes. Every morning she complains. Every evening she dreams about leaving. Eventually she is offered a position she has always wanted. Better environment, better salary, more freedom. Instead of celebrating, she begins noticing reasons to stay where she is. What if the new people don't like me? What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? Friends think she lacks confidence. That isn't the whole story. She is mourning the loss of predictability. Even painful certainty can feel safer than hopeful uncertainty. There's an old bridge crossing a deep canyon. People have walked across it for decades. It creaks. The wood is worn. Some boards are missing. Everyone agrees it should be replaced. Eventually, a beautiful new bridge is built beside it. It is stronger, safer, designed with modern engineering. Yet for weeks, many people continue using the old bridge, not because they believe it is better, because they know every sound it makes. They know exactly where it bends. They trust what they already understand. The new bridge asks for something difficult. The willingness to trust before familiarity exists. Personal growth works exactly the same way. You cannot become familiar with your future while standing inside your past. There's always a crossing, and crossings rarely feel comfortable. Your old self does something fascinating during this period. It begins rewriting the story. It does not usually say, "Stay where you are forever." That would be too obvious. Instead, it whispers softer arguments. Wait until next month. Do more research. You're still missing something. Get one more certificate. Read one more book. Save a little more money. Prepare a little longer. Preparation is important. But there comes a point where preparation quietly transforms into hiding. The mind is remarkably creative when protecting familiar territory. There was once a sailor preparing for a long voyage. Every morning he inspected the ship. He checked the ropes, repaired the sails, organized supplies, studied weather reports. Months passed, then years. The ship became perfect. The voyage never began. He believed he was preparing. In reality, he had become addicted to readiness. Many dreams quietly disappear inside endless preparation, not because people lack ability, because movement feels riskier than planning. Planning keeps possibility alive without demanding courage. Action asks for both. There's another hidden reason success can feel frightening. Every identity comes with relationships. Think back to your childhood. Perhaps you were known as the quiet one, the responsible one, the funny one, the smart one, the difficult one, the helper, the peacemaker, the dreamer. Those labels seem harmless. Yet over time, they quietly become social contracts. People begin expecting you to behave in certain ways. Then one day you begin changing. You become more confident, more honest, more ambitious. You stop apologizing for existing. You set boundaries. You protect your peace. Something unexpected happens. Not everyone celebrates. Some people become uncomfortable, not because your growth hurts them directly, because your change silently questions their own decisions. Growth changes relationships, sometimes beautifully, sometimes painfully. There's a bucket full of crabs. One crab climbs toward the top. Before it escapes, another crab pulls it back down. People often laugh at this image, yet versions of it happen every day. Someone starts exercising. Friends encourage them at first. Months later, the jokes begin. You've changed. You're no fun anymore. You think you're better than us now? Notice something important. The criticism rarely begins when the person first announces their goal. It often begins when the change becomes believable. Real transformation forces other people to confront possibilities they have been avoiding. Not everyone welcomes that feeling. This creates a difficult emotional conflict. Part of you wants to grow. Another part wants to belong. For thousands of years, belonging meant survival. Being rejected by the group could be life-threatening. Today, rejection usually wounds a heart instead of threatening life. Your nervous system has not fully updated that information. That is why speaking honestly can make your heart race. Not because honesty is dangerous, because isolation once was. There's a child learning to ride a bicycle. The parent runs beside them, holding the seat. Eventually, the parent lets go. The child continues riding without realizing it. Then they look back. The moment they notice they are alone, fear arrives. They wobble. They fall. Nothing changed except awareness. Sometimes your old self behaves like that child. As long as it believes someone else is holding everything together, it feels calm. The moment it realizes you are becoming responsible for your own life, fear appears. Responsibility is exciting. It is also lonely at first, not because you are alone, because excuses quietly disappear. Blaming circumstances becomes harder. Blaming the past becomes harder. Waiting for permission becomes harder. Freedom always arrives holding hands with responsibility. Many people want one without the other. Life never separates them. There's another misunderstanding that keeps people trapped. They believe courage feels powerful. Sometimes courage feels fragile. Sometimes it feels like trembling hands while telling the truth. Sometimes it feels like pressing send before your mind invents another excuse. Sometimes it feels like walking into a room where nobody knows your name. Sometimes it feels like saying, I deserve better, not with anger, with quiet certainty. The movies have taught us that courage is loud. Real courage often whispers. It rarely announces itself. It simply keeps taking one more honest step. There is a blacksmith shaping a piece of steel. Every strike of the hammer looks similar. An observer might think nothing is changing, yet inside the metal, tiny shifts are happening. The structure is becoming stronger. One strike never creates the transformation, neither do 10. It is the accumulation that changes everything. Your character develops exactly the same way. One difficult conversation, one healthy decision, one promise kept, one temptation resisted. Each moment appears insignificant. Together they create someone entirely different. The old self hates accumulation. It loves dramatic evidence. If I'm really changing, I should already feel different. If I'm healing, I shouldn't struggle anymore. If I'm becoming confident, fear should disappear. Growth rarely behaves that way. The tree does not stop bending because it has become stronger. It bends without breaking. That is the difference. There's a mountain climber approaching the summit. The air becomes thinner. Breathing becomes harder. Every step requires more effort than the last. It would be easy to believe something has gone wrong. In reality, difficulty is evidence of elevation. Life often follows the same pattern. The closer you move toward a new identity, the more resistance you may temporarily experience. Not because you are moving in the wrong direction, because your entire system is adjusting to a different altitude. One of the quietest lies your old self tells is this: if this feels difficult, it must not be right. Yet think about every meaningful experience you've ever had. Learning to walk, learning to drive, falling in love, forgiving someone, building trust, raising a child, starting over. None of them were easy. Difficulty alone tells you almost nothing. The better question is this: what kind of difficulty am I experiencing? Is it the pain of staying the same, or the discomfort of becoming someone new? Those are not equal. One slowly shrinks your life. The other quietly expands it. There comes a moment when you begin noticing something extraordinary. You no longer argue with every fearful thought. You no longer believe every emotional prediction. You stop asking, what if everything goes wrong? Instead, another question quietly appears. What if my old self has simply never been here before? That question changes the conversation completely, because suddenly fear is no longer an enemy. It becomes evidence that you are approaching unfamiliar territory. Not every unfamiliar place contains danger. Some contain the life you have been searching for all along. Then, one ordinary morning, you notice something almost impossible to explain. The habits that once required enormous effort begin happening naturally. The boundaries that once felt selfish begin feeling peaceful. The dreams that once felt unrealistic begin feeling normal. Without realizing it, you have begun building a new definition of familiar. And that may be the most powerful transformation of all. Because once your mind stops fighting the future, it begins protecting it. Yet beneath that beautiful change waits another mystery. If your mind can learn to defend a better life just as fiercely as it once defended the old one, what decides which version of you becomes the one it chooses to protect? Chapter 6. The quiet grief of letting your old life end. Not every loss looks like a funeral. Some losses happen while everyone around you believes you should be celebrating. You get the promotion. You leave the relationship that was hurting you. You move into a new home. You finally become healthier. You begin saying no without apologizing. People congratulate you. They tell you how proud they are. They remind you that this is exactly what you wanted. And they are right. But something inside you still feels unexpectedly heavy. You cannot explain it. You almost feel guilty for not being happier. You wonder if something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong. You are grieving, not because you made the wrong decision, because every new life quietly asks an old one to end. Most people think grief belongs only to death. In reality, grief appears whenever something familiar disappears. Even if what disappears was hurting you. There's a woman who finally leaves a house she has lived in for 30 years. The roof leaked. The walls were cracked. The heating barely worked. She complained about it for decades. When the moving truck arrives, she walks through every empty room one last time. Her hand slowly touches the doorway where her children's heights were marked. She stands in the kitchen where thousands of ordinary mornings quietly became memories. Then she cries, not because she wants a broken house back, because part of her life ended inside those walls. The new house may be better, but it cannot immediately replace 30 years of familiarity. The heart measures change differently than the mind. Your old self is much like that old house. It may have limited you. It may have exhausted you. It may have convinced you to settle for less than you deserved. Yet it also held every version of you that learned how to survive. Walking away from it is not only exciting, it is deeply emotional. That is why growth often feels strangely lonely. You are not only meeting someone new, you are quietly saying goodbye to someone who's been with you your entire life. There's an old photograph tucked inside a drawer. You find it years after it was taken. You barely recognize the person smiling back at you. Their hairstyle is different. Their clothes belong to another season of life. Their dreams were different. Their fears were different. You smile, Not because you wish you could go back, because you suddenly realize that person did everything they knew how to do. Perhaps they made mistakes. Perhaps they believed things that were never true. Perhaps they stayed too long in places they should have left. Still, they carried you here. Your old self deserves the same compassion. Many people try to destroy the person they used to be. They speak harshly about their past. I was so weak. I wasted so many years. I can't believe I allowed that. Those words may sound like determination. Often they are hidden shame. Shame rarely creates lasting change. It usually creates better hiding places. The old self does not need humiliation. It needs understanding. Think about a firefighter who spends years running into burning buildings. His instincts save countless lives. He learns to move quickly, never hesitate, always expect danger. Then one day he retires. Years later, he still notices every emergency exit in every restaurant. He still sits facing the door. His body remains alert long after the fires have ended. Would you criticize him for that? Of course not. You would understand that his nervous system simply learned its job well. Your old self learned its job well too. It learned how to protect you, perhaps imperfectly, perhaps clumsily, but sincerely. That changes the entire conversation. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you begin asking, "What was this behavior trying to protect?" That single question opens doors that force never could. The person who constantly seeks approval may have once been protecting connection. The person who avoids conflict may have been protecting peace. The person who never asks for help may have been protecting dignity. The person who keeps everyone at a distance may have been protecting a wounded heart. Every behavior has a history. Most people only judge the behavior. Very few become curious about its origin. Curiosity softens what judgment hardens. There's an old tree standing alone in the middle of a field. Its branches lean dramatically toward one side. A visitor laughs. What a strange tree. An old farmer shakes his head. It spent 20 years growing against powerful winds. Suddenly, the tree no longer looks strange. It looks understandable. People are no different. Many parts of your personality were shaped by winds other people never saw. The difficulty begins when the wind stops, but the tree continues leaning. There comes a time when protection quietly becomes limitation. The shield that once saved you starts blocking the sunlight. The walls that once kept danger out begin keeping love out as well. This is one of the hardest moments in personal growth. Not because you discover your weaknesses, because you discover that some of your greatest strengths have quietly become your greatest prisons. Being independent is beautiful. Never allow yourself to rely on anyone is exhausting. Working hard is admirable. Believing your worth depends entirely on productivity slowly steals your peace. Being cautious is wise. Trusting no one eventually becomes another form of loneliness. Every strength becomes dangerous when fear refuses to let it rest. There's another kind of grief few people recognize. The grief of unmet potential. Not the life you lived. The life you almost lived. The business you nearly started. The conversation you almost had. The book you almost wrote. The person you almost became. Most regrets are not about failure. They are about hesitation. Years later, people rarely say, "I wish I had failed less." More often, they quietly whisper, "I wonder what would have happened if I had tried." That question can echo for decades, not because the answer is painful, because it never arrives. Uncertainty often lasts longer than disappointment. There's a painter who keeps one blank canvas in the corner of his studio for years. He buys better brushes, better paints, studies new techniques. He tells himself the masterpiece deserves perfect timing. Visitors admire the empty canvas. He calls it preparation. Deep down, he knows something else. The blank canvas protects him. As long as nothing is painted, nothing can be judged. Perfection often disguises itself as patience. The old self loves perfect timing, because perfect timing rarely arrives. Life quietly rewards imperfect beginnings. A seed does not wait until every cloud has disappeared before it begins growing. A river does not wait until every stone has been removed before it starts flowing. Nature moves with uncertainty. Only humans often demand certainty before movement. There is a quiet freedom waiting on the other side of that realization. You stop asking, how do I know this will work? Instead, you ask, what kind of person do I become by honestly trying? That question cannot be answered by success alone. It is answered by courage. There is another surprising truth. The old self often mistakes peace for boredom. If your life has been filled with constant emotional drama, calm can initially feel empty. Someone leaves a toxic relationship and suddenly misses the emotional highs and lows. Not because the relationship was healthy, because chaos had become stimulating. Someone finally pays off years of debt. Instead of feeling relieved, they become strangely restless. Someone heals enough to stop arguing with everyone around them. The silence feels unfamiliar. Without noticing it, they begin creating small conflicts. The nervous system sometimes confuses intensity with aliveness, but there's a profound difference. A storm is intense. A sunrise is not. Yet one destroys while the other quietly gives life. Many people have spent so long surviving storms that they struggle to recognize the quiet beauty of sunrise. Peace rarely announces itself. It often feels ordinary. You wake up without anxiety. You enjoy breakfast without rushing. You finish your work without constant self-criticism. You laugh more easily. You sleep more deeply. Nothing dramatic happened. That is precisely the point. Healing often removes unnecessary drama rather than adding extraordinary excitement. The old self sometimes whispers, "Is this all there is?" Not because life has become smaller, because suffering once created the illusion of significance. When life becomes calmer, you begin noticing smaller joys that chaos once drowned out. The warmth of sunlight through a window, a genuine conversation, the satisfaction of finishing what you started, the comfort of coming home to your own thoughts instead of running from them. There is wealth hidden inside ordinary moments. The old self rarely notices it. It is always searching for emergencies. There is a watchmaker who inherited hundreds of clocks from his grandfather. Every morning he walks through the workshop, listening carefully. Most people hear noise. He hears rhythm. One day a customer asks, "How do you know when a clock is broken?" He smiles. "I listen for the one trying too hard." There is wisdom hidden there. Health often looks quieter than dysfunction. Confidence rarely shouts. Peace rarely demands attention. A healthy relationship usually feels less dramatic than an unhealthy one. A healthy mind often feels less exciting than an anxious one. Many people overlook growth because they expect it to feel spectacular. Instead, it feels stable. Stability is deeply underrated. There is another farewell that eventually arrives. You begin disappointing people who benefited from your old identity. The friend who expected you to always say yes. The co-worker who relied on your silence. The family member who preferred you uncertain because certainty challenged their comfort. This hurts, not because you are becoming selfish, because every boundary redraws a relationship. Some people will adjust. Others will quietly drift away. Not every departure is a tragedy. Some departures create the space your future has been waiting for. There's a gardener pruning a rose bush. A passerby watches branches fall to ground. "What a shame," they say. The gardener simply continues working. Months later, the bush blooms more beautifully than before. The branches were never the enemy. They had simply finished serving their purpose. Growth often asks the same of us. Not everything can come with you. Old beliefs, old roles, old explanations, old versions of success, old fears disguised as wisdom. Some things must quietly fall away, not because they were worthless, but because they no longer belong to the life you are growing into. One evening, after years of carrying armor into every room, you may notice something unusual. You enter a conversation without preparing for conflict. You receive a compliment without arguing against it. You rest without feeling guilty. You look in the mirror and feel neither pride nor shame, just recognition. For the first time in a very long while, you are not trying to become someone else. You are allowing yourself to be someone true. And in that quiet space, another realization begins to unfold. If so much of your suffering came from protecting a version of yourself that no longer needed protection, what might become possible once you stop defending the past and begin trusting the person who is quietly waiting in your future? Chapter 7. the future you are already watching. There's a conversation happening inside you every single day. You almost never hear it. It doesn't use words. It doesn't ask for your attention. Yet it quietly influences nearly every decision you make. One voice asks, "What do I feel like doing right now?" Another asks, "What kind of person am I becoming?" Most people believe those are the same question. They are not. One belongs to the present moment. The other belongs to your future. And the distance between those two questions determines the direction of your life. There's an old stone mason who spends his days carving enormous blocks of granite. One afternoon, a young traveler stops to watch him work. The traveler cannot understand why the old man keeps striking the same piece of stone. Nothing appears to change. The rock looks exactly the same. Finally, the traveler asks, "Why do you keep hitting the same place?" The mason smiles without stopping. "I'm not breaking the stone." "What are you breaking?" "The person who believes the stone will never change." Hours later, with one final strike, the granite splits cleanly in two. Everyone who witnessed the last blow believes that single moment caused a break. Only the mason knows that every strike mattered. Life has a strange way of hiding progress until the moment it becomes impossible to ignore. That is why so many people quit too early. They judge their future using today's evidence. But today's evidence is often incomplete. A tree does not reveal its growth every morning. Yet no one returns after 10 years and says it stayed the same. The quiet work was happening all along. Your future self is built exactly that way, not through dramatic moments, through invisible accumulation. There is something even more fascinating. Your future is constantly sending invitations back to the present, not messages, not predictions, invitations. Every decision quietly asks, will you become the kind of person who belongs there? Think about someone who dreams of becoming physically healthy. They often ask, what workout should I do? That seems like the obvious question. Yet another question changes everything. What would a healthy person naturally do today? Notice the difference. The first searches for an activity. The second searches for an identity. The same is true everywhere. Instead of asking, how do I become confident? Perhaps ask, how would a confident person respond to this situation? Instead of asking, how do I become patient? Ask, what would patience choose right now? At first, these questions feel artificial. That is because you are borrowing the perspective of someone you have not fully become yet. Children do something similar every day. A little girl wraps a towel around her shoulders and pretends to be a superhero. A little boy picks up a stick and believes it is a sword. They play before reality agrees. Adults often reverse the order. They wait for reality before allowing themselves to think differently. What if growth quietly asks for the courage to practice before certainty arrives? There is a violin hanging in a music shop. Beautiful, perfectly crafted. It's what shines under the light. Yet it remains completely silent. Not because it lacks beauty, because no one has chosen to play it. Potential is strangely similar. Many people spend their lives protecting it instead of expressing it. I could write a book someday. I could start a business. I could learn another language. I could travel. I could speak in public. I could change. Potential sounds comforting. Reality requires commitment. The old self loves potential because it remains untouched by failure. The new self quietly chooses participation instead. There is a hidden cost to constantly postponing your future. Every delayed decision teaches your mind something. Not only about the world, about yourself. When you repeatedly postpone what matters most, your mind slowly begins believing, this must not be important. Attention reveals value. Time reveals priority. You may sincerely say that your dream matters, but your daily actions gently ask, then why does it always come last? That question is uncomfortable, not because it accuses you, because it invites honesty. Most people are not lying when they say they want a different life. They simply underestimate how often comfort quietly outranks intention. Comfort rarely announces itself. It disguises itself as reasonable thinking. I've had a long day. I'll be more productive tomorrow. This isn't the right mood. I should wait until I have more energy. None of those sentences are completely false. That is why they are so convincing. The most dangerous excuses are rarely outrageous. They are almost true. There is a fisherman who leaves before sunrise every morning. His grandson once asks why he never waits until weather feels perfect. The old man laughs softly. "If I waited for perfect weather," he says, "I'd forget what the ocean looks like." Life quietly rewards those who learn to move through imperfect conditions, not recklessly, faithfully. The future rarely belongs to the person waiting for certainty. It often belongs to the one who learned to walk while uncertainty walked beside them. There's another force shaping your future that few people notice. The stories you repeatedly tell about tomorrow. Listen carefully to the language people use. "I'll probably mess it up. Things never work out for me. I know something will go wrong. I'm just being realistic." Sometimes realism is wisdom. Sometimes it is disappointment rehearsed so many times that it begins calling itself truth. Your mind pays close attention to expectation, not because expectation creates reality by magic, because expectation influences preparation. Someone who quietly believes it will fail often prepares differently. They hesitate, they overthink, they pull back at the last moment. Then the outcome appears to confirm the story they already believed. The cycle continues. There was a young architect designing his first building. For weeks, he carried the blueprints everywhere. One afternoon, his mentor asked, "How often do you study the cracks?" The young man looked confused. "There aren't any cracks." The mentor nodded. "Exactly. Stop drawing them before the building even exists." Many people spend years mentally decorating disasters that have not happened. They rehearse conversations that never occur, arguments that never begin, failures that never arrive. Their imagination becomes an architect of fear instead of possibility. The remarkable thing about imagination is that it does not care whether you are building hope or worry. It simply builds whatever receives your attention. There's a mirror inside every funhouse. Some make you appear taller, some shorter, some stretch your face beyond recognition. You laugh because you understand something important. The mirror is distorting reality. Now think about fear. Fear is often a psychological funhouse mirror. It enlarges obstacles, shrinks your abilities, magnifies uncertainty, reduces possibility. You would never trust a distorted mirror to describe your body. Why trust every fearful thought to describe your future? This does not mean ignoring danger. Wisdom pays attention to danger. Fear often invents extra danger that never existed. The two are not the same. There comes a point where your relationship with uncertainty quietly changes. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" another question naturally appears. "What if I grow because I tried?" Failure and growth are not opposites. Many times they arrive together. Think about learning to write your name. Your first attempts look nothing like they do today. If someone had judged your future using those first shaky letters, they would have been completely wrong. Beginnings are poor predictors of endings. Yet adults often expect themselves to master new seasons immediately. They extend enormous patience to children, very little to themselves. There's a gardener who plants 2 apple trees. The first spends its early years producing only a handful of fruit. The second appears stronger. It grows faster. People praise it. Years later, a powerful storm arrives. The faster tree snaps in half. The slower tree remains standing. Its roots have been growing where no one bothered looking. Many people compare visible progress. Almost no one compares invisible foundations. Patience rarely receives applause, yet it quietly carries everything that lasts. There is another hidden truth about the future. It never arrives all at once. People often speak as though one magical day changes everything. When I finally get there, when my life begins, when everything falls into place. But life almost never transforms in one dramatic moment. Instead, ordinary Tuesdays quietly become extraordinary years. The future is built inside days that look forgettable while you are living them. A single conversation, a single walk, a single decision to keep going, a single honest apology, a single page written before bed. These moments rarely feel historic. History quietly grows out of them anyway. There's a grandfather teaching his grandson how to build a wooden table. The boy grows frustrated. This is taking forever. The old man places one small screw into the wood, then another. He says nothing. When the table is finished, the grandfather runs his hand across its smooth surface. People admire the table, he says. They rarely appreciate the screws. Character is built that way. Quiet choices no one applauds. Invisible acts no one notices. Promises no one else knows you kept. One of the greatest freedoms in life arrives when you stop asking whether today feels significant. You begin asking whether today moved you one step closer to the person you wish to become. Some days the answer feels obvious. Other days it barely exists. Both days matter. The river does not complain that today's drop of water seems too small. It simply continues flowing. Eventually it shapes mountains. Perhaps that is the deepest misunderstanding about change. People believe transformation happens because of extraordinary effort. More often it happens because ordinary effort survives ordinary days. The future is surprisingly patient. It does not demand perfection. It quietly asks for consistency. And then something extraordinary begins happening. The person you hope to become no longer feels like a stranger. Their decisions begin feeling natural. Their values begin guiding your mornings. Their courage quietly becomes your own. Without noticing it, the distance between who you are and who you wish to become begins disappearing. One day you realize you are no longer pretending. You have simply become someone your old self could barely recognize. Yet just when that realization settles into your heart, another mystery quietly emerges. If the future has been shaping you all along. Could be that your greatest obstacle was never the past, but the story you kept telling yourself about what was still possible. Chapter 8. The day you stop arguing with yourself. There comes a quiet day that almost no one plans for. There is no celebration, no dramatic breakthrough, no moment where the sky suddenly looks different. Nothing extraordinary happens, and yet everything changes. It is a day you stop treating yourself like two different people. Until then, life often feels like a constant negotiation. One part of you wants to wake up early. Another wants 5 more minutes. One part wants to save money. Another wants immediate comfort. One part wants peace. Another wants to win every argument. One part dreams about becoming stronger. Another whispers that starting tomorrow would be easier. For years, these two voices compete for control. Most people assume this conflict is simply part of being human. To some degree it is, but there's a hidden cost that very few people notice. Every argument with yourself drains energy before life even begins. Think about a family trying to push a heavy car up a hill. If everyone pushes in the same direction, the car slowly begins moving. It is difficult, but possible. Now, picture half the family pushing forward while the other half pushes backward. They become exhausted, not because the car is too heavy, because their strength is fighting itself. Many lives unfold exactly this way. Not because people lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, because their energy is divided. The greatest battle is not between you and the world. It is between two futures quietly competing inside the same heart. There's a violin orchestra preparing for a concert. Every musician is incredibly skilled. The violinist plays beautifully. The pianist is exceptional. The drummer has perfect rhythm. But no one is following the same piece of music. Each person begins whenever they want. Each chooses a different tempo. The audience does not hear talent. They hear confusion. A single orchestra with divided direction creates only noise. The human mind works the same way. Knowledge alone is never enough. Intelligence alone is never enough. Potential alone is never enough. Something deeper must happen. Alignment. When your thoughts, actions, values, and choices slowly begin facing the same direction, your life starts feeling lighter. Not because the road became easier, because you stopped carrying yourself in opposite directions. There's another misunderstanding about change that quietly keeps people trapped. Many believe discipline means forcing yourself every single day. But force is difficult to maintain. Force becomes tired. Force eventually begins negotiating. Alignment is different. Alignment removes many of the arguments before they begin. Think about someone who truly values honesty. When faced with a difficult decision, they may still feel nervous, but they rarely spend hours debating whether to lie. Their identity has already made the decision. This saves enormous mental energy. Or think about someone who genuinely sees themselves as a healthy person. Exercise no longer feels like punishment. It becomes part of protecting someone they already believe they are. Notice what changed, not the action, the relationship with the action. There's an elderly sailor who spent more than 50 years crossing the same sea. One day a young passenger asked him how he always stayed calm during storms. The old sailor looked at the waves for a long moment. "I stopped fighting the ocean years ago." "What do you mean?" "I learned the difference between steering and resisting." Those words stayed with the young passenger for the rest of his life. Many people spend enormous energy resisting reality. They resist uncomfortable emotions. They resist uncertainty. They resist mistakes. They resist change. Ironically, resistance often gives those experiences even more power. Place your hand in a river and try to stop the current. You become exhausted. Float with the current while gently steering toward the shore, and suddenly the same water becomes something you can work with instead of fight against. Your emotions deserve the same wisdom. Fear does not always require battle. Sometimes it simply asks to be acknowledged without becoming your leader. Sadness does not always need solving. Sometimes it only needs room to pass. Anger does not always demand action. Sometimes it simply reveals that something inside you deserves attention. When you stop declaring war on every emotion, something surprising happens. Your emotions stop behaving like enemies. They begin behaving like messengers. Some messages are useful. Some are outdated. But all of them become easy to understand once you stop shouting over them. There's a woman who owns an old radio, inherited from her grandfather. Most stations come through clearly. Occasionally, loud static interrupts the music. For years, she believed the static was the enemy. One afternoon, an electrician visits her home. He smiles. "The radio isn't broken." "Then why all the noise?" "It simply isn't tuned correctly." Many people spend years trying to eliminate the noise inside their minds. Perhaps the wiser goal is learning what deserves your attention and what deserves to fade into the background. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every emotion deserves obedience. Not every memory deserves another rehearsal. Attention is a form of permission. What you repeatedly attend to slowly becomes stronger. There's another layer beneath this, one that quietly explains why some people seem peaceful even during difficult seasons. They no longer expect life to be free from discomfort. That expectation quietly disappeared. Instead, they began expecting themselves to remain present while discomfort comes and goes. This changes everything. Suppose two hikers begin climbing the same mountain. The first expects a perfectly smooth path. Every loose rock feels unfair. Every steep section becomes evidence that something has gone wrong. The second expects the climb to be challenging. The same rocks become part of the journey. The mountain remained identical. Only expectation changed. Many emotional struggles are made heavier by the belief that they should not exist. I shouldn't still feel afraid. I shouldn't still miss them. I shouldn't still be struggling. Those words quietly create a second layer of suffering. Not only are you carrying fear, you are criticizing yourself for carrying it. Not only are you grieving, you are judging yourself for grieving. Acceptance is often misunderstood. People think accepting something means approving of it. Not at all. Acceptance simply means seeing clearly before choosing wisely. A doctor cannot treat an illness they refuse to acknowledge. A gardener cannot remove weeds they pretend are flowers. Clarity always comes before change. There is a blacksmith who spends hours heating steel until it glows bright orange. His apprentice becomes impatient. "Why don't you strike it now?" The old man shakes his head. "It isn't ready." Minutes later, he lifts the hammer. One precise strike shapes the metal exactly as intended. The apprentice asks, "Why did one strike work now when it wouldn't have worked before?" The old man smiles. Timing matters more than force. That lesson reaches far beyond metal. Many people try to force themselves into becoming different. They attack themselves with criticism, with shame, with impossible expectations. Yet real transformation often happens when understanding arrives first. You become ready to change not because someone finally shouted loudly enough, Because something inside you finally became clear enough. There's another invisible habit quietly shaping your future. The habit of returning. Not returning to old patterns. Returning to yourself. Everyone loses focus. Everyone becomes discouraged. Everyone has difficult days. The difference is not who falls away. The difference is who quietly comes back. A musician misses practice, then returns. A writer stares at a blank page, then writes one sentence. A couple has an argument, then chooses repair instead of pride. A student fails an exam, then studies again. Life rewards returning far more than perfection. Perfection asks for flawlessness. Returning asks only for honesty. The old self often says, "You've already ruined today." The wiser voice quietly replies, "The next decision still belongs to you." That sentence carries enormous freedom. One unhealthy meal does not decide your health. One missed workout does not erase your strength. One difficult conversation does not define your relationship. One mistake does not cancel your character. Life is rarely shaped by isolated moments. It is shaped by what follows them. A compass does not panic because a traveler takes one wrong step. It simply continues pointing north. Perhaps your values should work the same way, not condemning you when you drift, simply inviting you back. There's an old clock hanging inside a village church. Every hour it rings. For decades, people depended on it. One winter, a violent storm damaged a mechanism. The clock lost several minutes every day. The village watchmaker visited each evening. He never smashed the clock in frustration. He gently adjusted it, day after day, week after week. Eventually, the clock kept perfect time again. The watchmaker understood something important. Small corrections prevent enormous errors. Most people wait until life completely falls apart before changing direction. Wisdom prefers smaller adjustments. A difficult conversation today, instead of years of resentment. 10 quiet minutes of reflection instead of months of confusion. One honest apology instead of endless distance. One healthy boundary instead of decades of exhaustion. Tiny corrections quietly protect entire futures. There's another beautiful truth hidden beneath all of this. You are not only becoming someone different, you are becoming someone more integrated. The frightened child inside you no longer has to hide. The ambitious dreamer no longer has to apologize. The exhausted part of you finally receives compassion. The courageous part finally receives permission. The pieces begin recognizing each other instead of competing for control. This creates an inner peace that achievement alone can never provide, because achievement without inner harmony often produces more success and more emptiness. Inner harmony quietly transforms success into fulfillment. One evening, years from now, someone may ask what changed your life. They may expect you to describe one extraordinary event, one life-changing book, one powerful conversation, one dramatic decision. You might smile because you will know the truth. Your life changed the day you stopped trying to defeat yourself and started becoming someone you could gently walk beside. Then another realization quietly begins unfolding beneath the silence. If your greatest strength has never been perfection, but your willingness to return to yourself again and again, what kind of life becomes possible when you finally stop believing that one difficult day has the power to decide who you are? Chapter 9. The freedom hidden inside uncertainty. There is one feeling your old self has spent years trying to avoid. It is not a failure. It is not rejection. It is not even pain. It is uncertain. Think about how often you reach for certainty without noticing. You check your phone, hoping for a reply. You refresh your email, looking for news. You replay a conversation, try and figure out exactly what someone meant. You ask for another opinion, then another. You read one more article, watch one more video, wait one more week before making a decision. From the outside, it looks like careful thinking. Deep down, something else is happening. Your mind is searching for solid ground before it takes the next step. That sounds reasonable. After all, who wouldn't want certainty? But life quietly refuses to make that bargain. The greatest opportunities almost always arrive wrapped in uncertainty. No one knows exactly how a new relationship will unfold. No one knows whether a business will succeed. No one knows how people will respond to a creative idea. No one knows where one honest conversation might lead. Yet somehow, the people who build extraordinary lives continue moving anyway, not because they possess secret knowledge, because they stopped demanding guarantees. There was a ferryman who spent his entire life carrying people across a wide river. Every morning, travelers asked the same question: is it safe? The old man always gave the same answer: the river has never promised anyone certainty. One day a young traveler became frustrated. Then how do people ever cross? The ferryman smiled. They stopped asking the river for promises and start trusting their ability to row. That may be one of the greatest shifts a person can make. Instead of asking life to become predictable, you begin becoming adaptable. There's an enormous difference. One tries to control the future. The other quietly prepares for it. Many people believe confidence comes from knowing what will happen. Real confidence often comes from believing that whatever happens, you will meet it honestly. Think back to your childhood. When you first learned to walk, every step was uncertain. There were no guarantees. You fell. You cried. You stood up again. No one expected perfection. No one looked at a toddler falling down and concluded walking just isn't for you. Yet adults often treat themselves that way. One setback, one awkward conversation, one disappointing result. Suddenly, they begin questioning their entire future. Children see falling as part of learning. Adults often mistake it for proof they should stop. Somewhere along the way, many of us quietly decided that discomfort meant we were heading in the wrong direction. Life keeps trying to teach the opposite lesson. There is a mountain guide who has climbed the same trail hundreds of times. One afternoon, thick fog covers everything. The hikers become anxious. I can't see the summit anymore. The guide nods calmly. You were never supposed to. What do you mean? If you could already see the entire journey, it wouldn't require faith. The fog did not remove the mountain. It only removed the illusion of complete visibility. Many seasons of life feel exactly like that. You cannot see the full path. You only see the next few steps. Your old self hates that. It wants the entire map before moving. But maps are strange things. You usually understand them best after reaching the destination. There is another quiet habit that keeps people attached to certainty. They confuse control with safety. Think about someone trying to hold sand tightly in their fist. The harder they squeeze, the faster the sand slips through their fingers. Now think about someone holding their hand open. The sand rests gently in their palm. Many parts of life behave the same way. Relationships cannot be controlled into becoming healthy. Children cannot be controlled into becoming wise. The future cannot be controlled into becoming certain. The harder we try to force everything into our preferred shape, the more exhausted we become. Control promises relief. Often it quietly creates fear. Because once you believe everything depends on your control, every unexpected event begins feeling like a personal failure. There's another way to live. Not carelessly, not passively, responsibly. You prepare as well as you can. You act with integrity. You learn. You adapt. Then you release what no longer belongs to you. That release is not weakness. It is maturity. There was an old gardener whose orchard produced beautiful fruit year after year. One spring, a violent storm destroyed nearly half his trees. His neighbors expected him to collapse in despair. Instead, they found him planting new saplings the very next morning. A young boy asked, "Aren't you angry?" The old man gently placed another tree into the soil. "Of course." "Then why are you planting again?" "Because storms decide the weather." He smiled softly. "They don't get to decide my hands." There is remarkable freedom hidden inside that answer. You cannot always choose what arrives. You can always choose who arrives with it. That distinction quietly changes everything. Life will disappoint you. People will misunderstand you. Plans will collapse. Unexpected losses will appear. These truths are not signs that life is unfair. They are simply part of being alive. The old self often spends enormous energy asking, "Why is this happening to me?" The wiser part slowly begins asking, "Who do I become because this is happening?" One question creates resentment. The other creates growth. There's a potter shaping clay on a spinning wheel. The clay constantly changes under pressure. If the potter becomes angry every time the shape shifts, nothing beautiful will ever emerge. Instead, the potter expects movement. Adjustment becomes part of the craft. Perhaps your life deserves the same patience. You are not a finished sculpture. You are still being shaped. Not every season exists to display your strength. Some exist to deepen it. There's another hidden truth about uncertainty. It exposes what you truly trust. Many people believe they trust themselves. Then uncertainty arrives. Suddenly, they need endless reassurance, approval, confirmation, permission. Without realizing it, they begin borrowing confidence from everyone around them. That borrowed confidence is fragile. It disappears the moment criticism appears. Real self-trust develops differently. It grows each time you make a difficult decision that aligns with your values, even when nobody applauds. It grows when you tell the truth, although it costs you something. It grows when you choose patience over panic. It grows when you quietly keep your promises. Self-trust is not built during easy seasons. Easy seasons rarely ask anything from you. Trust grows whenever uncertainty invites you to abandon yourself, and you gently refuse. There is a lighthouse standing on a lonely coastline. Every night, it shines across the water. It does not chase ships. It does not beg sailors to notice it. It simply continues doing what it was built to do. Whether the sea is calm or violent, the light remains steady. Many people spend their lives chasing validation. They constantly adjust themselves depending on who is watching. One group likes ambition. Another prefers modesty. One praises confidence. Another calls it arrogance. Trying to satisfy every opinion is like trying to hold every wave still. The ocean will always move. The lighthouse remains where it belongs. There comes a quiet peace when your values become stronger than other people's reactions. Not because criticism stops hurting, because it stops deciding. There's another illusion that often keeps people trapped. The illusion that clarity always comes before action. Sometimes clarity comes because of action. A traveler standing at the edge of a forest cannot see the path hidden deep inside the trees. Not because the path does not exist, because it reveals itself gradually. Every few steps, another section appears. Stand still forever, and nothing new becomes visible. Movement creates perspective. That is why so many answers arrive while walking, driving, working, living. The old self wants certainty before movement. Life quietly offers certainty through movement. There is a musician preparing for her first concert. The night before the performance, she barely sleeps. She worries about forgetting the notes, about disappointing the audience, about making mistakes. After the concert, someone asks, "When did the fear disappear?" She laughs. "It didn't." "So how did you perform?" "I stopped waiting for fear to leave." That answer carries profound wisdom. Many people postpone their lives until fear disappears. Fear often waits beside the road, smiling patiently. It knows that if you insist on perfect confidence before beginning, you may never begin at all. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing direction while fear continues talking. Eventually, fear grows tired of speaking to someone who no longer obeys every word. There's another gift hidden inside uncertainty. Humility. The moment you accept that you cannot predict everything, you begin paying closer attention. You listen more carefully. You observe more deeply. You become teachable. Certainty can quietly become arrogance. Uncertainty often becomes curiosity. Curiosity keeps the mind alive. It allows you to say, "I may not know everything," without feeling weak, because learning requires room. A cup already convinced it is full cannot receive fresh water. A mind convinced it already understands life often stops growing. There is an old professor who spent 60 years studying the stars. Near the end of his life, a student asked him, "After everything you've learned, what surprises you most?" The old man looked up at the night sky. How much more there is to wonder about. Wisdom rarely becomes louder with age. It often becomes quieter, not because it knows less, because it respects mystery more deeply. Perhaps it is where your old self and your new self finally begin to part ways. The old self searches for certainty because certainty feels safe. The new self discovers something more powerful, the ability to remain steady without it. One depends on perfect conditions. The other quietly carries peace into imperfect ones. One waits for the future to become clear. The other slowly becomes a kind of person who can walk through the fog. And one evening, without realizing exactly when it happened, you notice something extraordinary. You no longer need every answer before taking the next step. You no longer require every door to be open before leaving a room you have already outgrown. You have begun trusting something that once felt impossible to trust. Not the world, not luck, not circumstances, yourself. And once that quiet trust begins taking root, another question rises from somewhere even deeper. If the unknown is no longer your greatest fear, then what extraordinary life has been waiting just beyond the edge of everything you thought you needed to know? Chapter 10. The moment your old self finally lets go. There is a moment that never appears on a calendar. No one sends you an invitation. There is no ceremony, no applause, no dramatic music playing in the background. Most people don't even notice it while it is happening. Yet it may be the most important moment of an entire life. It is the moment your old self stops fighting quite so hard, not because it has been defeated, because it has finally been understood. For years you believed there was a war happening inside you. One side wanted peace. The other wanted fear. One wanted growth. The other wanted comfort. One wanted tomorrow. The other wanted yesterday. You try to silence one voice with another. You argue with yourself. Criticize yourself. Punish yourself. Promise yourself that next Monday, next month, next year would finally be different. But every battle left you more exhausted than before. There was never a winner. Only two frightened parts of the same person pulling in opposite directions. Then one quiet day something begins changing. Not outside, inside. You stop asking, how do I destroy the old me? Instead, another question appears. What has the old me been trying to protect all this time? Everything becomes different from that moment. There is an elderly locksmith who has spent his life opening doors. One afternoon, a young apprentice hands him a stubborn lock. It won't open, the apprentice says. The old man studies it carefully. He doesn't force it. He doesn't strike it with a hammer. He doesn't become angry. Instead, he gently listens. After a few moments, the lock quietly opens. The apprentice asks, "How did you know what to do?" The old locksmith smiles. Every lock tells you how it wants to be opened. People are not so different. Your old self was never a prison built to trap you forever. It was a lock built during a season when safety mattered more than freedom. You have spent years trying to break something that was only waiting to be understood. There is remarkable kindness hidden inside that realization, because suddenly your past no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes part of your story, not the whole story, just one chapter. Many people spend their lives trying to erase who they used to be. They wish they had never made those mistakes, never trusted those people, never wasted those years, never stayed so long, never doubted themselves. But consider a potter holding a cracked clay bowl. Most people see something broken. The potter sees something shaped. Every crack tells a history of pressure. Every mark tells a history of fire. Without those experiences, it would be an entirely different bowl. Your life carries marks too. Not all of them are beautiful. Some came from disappointment, some from betrayal, some from loneliness, some from grief, some from dreams that quietly disappear before anyone else even knew they existed. You cannot remove those marks without also removing the person who survived them. The goal was never to become someone untouched by life. The goal was to become someone life could no longer define. There is another truth that quietly surprises people. Healing does not erase memory. It changes your relationship with memory. Think about an old photograph. Perhaps once it made you cry. Years later you look at the same picture. The events have not changed. The people remain the same. Yet something inside you has. Now you see compassion where once you saw only pain. You notice lessons where once you noticed only loss. The picture remained frozen. You did not. This is how transformation usually happens. Not by changing yesterday. By changing the person who remembers yesterday. There's a woman who spent decades afraid of thunderstorms. As a little girl, she experienced one terrifying storm while home alone. every thunderclap afterward reminded her body of that afternoon. Years later, after becoming a mother, another storm arrived. Her young daughter became frightened. Without thinking, the woman smiled, lit a candle, wrapped a blanket around both of them, and began telling stories while rain tapped softly against the windows. Only later did she realize something extraordinary. For the first time in her life, she had experienced a storm without fear, not because storms had changed, because she had become someone capable of creating safety instead of searching for it. That is one of the quiet miracles of growth. The places that once frightened you eventually become places where someone else finds comfort because of you. The wound slowly becomes wisdom, not overnight, not automatically, patiently. There is a hidden difference between surviving life and participating in it. Survival asks, what must I avoid? Participation asks, what deserves my presence? One spends life scanning for danger. The other spends life noticing meaning. Meaning changes everything. Think about two builders laying bricks. One believes he is stacking stones. The other believes he is helping build a cathedral. The work looks identical. The experience feels completely different. Purpose quietly transforms effort. Many people become exhausted because they only see today's brick. They cannot yet see tomorrow's cathedral. There comes a season when your life begins asking different questions. Not, can you avoid failure? But, can you remain open? Not, can you stay comfortable? But, can you stay honest? Not, can you guarantee success? But, can you keep showing up? Those questions slowly become your compass. And something remarkable begins happening. You stop measuring your days only by outcomes. Instead, you begin measuring them by integrity. Did I act according to the person I want to become? Did I tell the truth? Did I stay present? Did I choose courage over convenience? Some days the answer is yes. Some days it is no. Both become opportunities instead of verdicts. There is an old violin maker who spends months crafting a single instrument. The wood must rest, dry, expand, contract. He cannot rush any part of the process. A customer once asked why it took so long. The old craftsman gently ran his fingers across the unfinished violin. If I hurry the wood, he said, the music disappears before it is ever played. Perhaps that is also true of people. Growth cannot always be accelerated. Some lessons require seasons. Some changes require repetition. Some wisdom arrives only after enough ordinary mornings have quietly passed. The old self wanted immediate transformation. The wiser self learns to respect timing. There's another freedom waiting near the end of this journey. The freedom of no longer needing to prove yourself to everyone. Think back to how much energy you may have spent trying to convince people, trying to explain your choices, your dreams, your boundaries, your healing, your silence, your ambition, your kindness, your worth. Eventually something shifts. You realize that people understand you according to the stories they are ready to hear, not always according to the truth you are living. This realization feels sad at first, then it becomes liberating. You stop performing. You begin living. There's a lighthouse standing on a cliff overlooking the sea. Tourists visit every day. Some admire it. Some criticize the paint. Some complain that the light is too bright. Others wish it were taller. The lighthouse never changes itself to satisfy passing opinions. Its purpose remains the same, to shine. Many people lose years trying to become everyone's favorite version of themselves. But every version built for approval quietly falls apart the moment approval disappears. Only the self built on truth continues standing. There is a farmer who plants an oak tree knowing he will never sit beneath its full shade. His grandson asks, "Why plant something you won't fully enjoy?" The old man smiles, "Because someone planted trees for me." There comes a point when personal growth stops being only about you. Your courage changes your children. Your honesty changes your friends. Your patience changes strangers. Your example gives silent permission to people who have been waiting their entire lives to believe change is possible. Transformation spreads quietly, like candlelight. One flame loses nothing by lighting another. Perhaps you will never know whose life changes because you refuse to give up on your own. That does not make the influence any less real. There is another hidden layer beneath everything you have discovered. You are not only changing your future, you are changing your relationship with time itself. Most people live in one of two places: regretting yesterday or fearing tomorrow. Very few truly arrive in today. Yet life has always existed only here, not in memory, not in imagination. Here, this breath, this decision, this conversation, this sunrise, this opportunity, this moment. The old self constantly traveled through time, searching for old mistakes, preparing for future disasters. The new self quietly returns home, again and again, not because the present is always easy, because it is the only place where change is possible. You cannot forgive yesterday from yesterday. You cannot build tomorrow from tomorrow. Everything meaningful begins here. There is an elderly monk who spent decades sweeping the same stone courtyard every morning. A visitor once asked, "After all these years, aren't you tired of doing the same thing?" The old man leaned gently on the broom. "I have never swept the same courtyard twice." The visitor looked confused. "It looks exactly the same." The monk smiled. "I wasn't. Growth often hides inside repetition. Not because the world changes each day, because you do. The same conversation reaches you differently. The same challenge reveals something new. The same sunrise touches a different heart. When you begin changing, life itself begins looking different. Not because reality transformed overnight, because the eyes looking at reality have quietly become wiser. Perhaps that is why two people can stand in the same rain. One curses a storm. The other smells the earth. One sees inconvenience. The other sees renewal. The rain never chose between them. Their minds did. There is one final truth your old self slowly comes to accept. The life ahead of you does not require perfection. It never did. It requires presence. Presence when fear appears. Presence when joy arrives. Presence when grief visits. Presence when uncertainty returns. Presence when old habits whisper your name. Not because presence eliminates difficulty, because it prevents difficulty from quietly becoming your identity. And then, almost without realizing when it happened, you discover something that once seemed impossible. The voice that used to pull you backward has become quieter, not silent, quieter. It still appears from time to time, on difficult mornings, during uncertain seasons, after unexpected disappointments. But now, instead of obeying it immediately, you gently smile, not with arrogance, with gratitude, because you finally understand who has been speaking. A frightened protector, an old companion, a version of you that carried more weight than anyone ever knew. You no longer hate that voice. You simply no longer let it choose the direction of your life. It can ride beside you. It no longer holds the steering wheel. And perhaps that is the deepest transformation of all. Not becoming fearless, not becoming perfect, not becoming someone entirely different, but finally becoming someone strong enough to welcome every version of yourself, while allowing only your wisest one to decide where you go next. As the silence settles and the journey begins to reveal its full meaning, one final realization quietly waits beyond everything you have heard so far. If your old self was never truly trying to stop you, but only trying to keep you safe, then what becomes possible the moment you thank it for its service and gently invite it to rest? Conclusion. When this journey began, you may have arrived carrying a quiet frustration that was difficult to explain. Perhaps you were tired of starting over. Perhaps you wondered why you kept returning to habits you had promised to leave behind. Perhaps you questioned why change felt so exhausting, even when you genuinely wanted a different life. Or perhaps you simply carried the silent feeling that there had to be more inside you than the life you had been living. If those feelings brought you here, something important has already happened. Not because every problem has disappeared, not because every fear has been solved, but because you are no longer looking at yourself through the same eyes. That may seem like a small change. It is anything but. There's an old saying among craftsmen that the hardest part of restoring an antique is not repairing the wood. It is learning to see what the wood could become before anyone else does. For a long time, you may have looked at yourself as though you were something that needed fixing, something broken, something unfinished. something constantly falling behind. But perhaps you now see something different. Not brokenness. History, not failure. Learning, not weakness. Protection. The person you have been was never simply a collection of mistakes. They were someone doing the best they could with the understanding they had at the time. That does not excuse every decision. It does not erase responsibility, but it replaces harsh judgment with honest understanding. And understanding is where lasting change quietly begins. One of the greatest misunderstandings about transformation is believing that it arrives all at once. We love dramatic stories. One decision, one speech, one morning, one miracle. Real life rarely unfolds that way. Real change usually arrives so quietly that you almost miss it. It appears when you pause before reacting, when you choose honesty over comfort, when you keep a promise to yourself that nobody else even knows you made, when you apologize instead of defending your pride, when you rest without believing you have to earn it, when you try again after believing you never would. These moments are so ordinary that they hardly seem important. Yet lives are built from ordinary moments repeated with intention. A river never cuts through stone because of one powerful wave. It shapes mountains because it keeps returning again and again and again. Perhaps that is what your life is asking of you. Not perfection, not constant motivation, simply a willingness to return. There will still be difficult mornings. Old thoughts may revisit you. Certain fears may knock on your door again. Some seasons will feel confusing. Others may feel lonely. There may even be moments when you wonder whether you have changed at all. When those moments come, remember this. Progress is not measured by never hearing the old voice again. It is measured by how differently you respond when it speaks. Years ago, perhaps you believed every fearful thought. Today, you pause. Years ago, one setback might have convinced you to quit. Today, you begin again. Years ago, you may have searched outside yourself for permission to become who you were meant to be. Today, you quietly give yourself that permission. That is not small. That is a different way of living. Think about the seasons of a tree. During winter, someone walking past might believe nothing is happening. The branches are bare. The leaves are gone. The tree appears motionless. Yet beneath the surface, roots continue their quiet work, preparing, strengthening, holding. No season tells the whole story. The same is true for you. Never judge your entire life by one difficult month. Never define yourself by one painful chapter. Never confuse a pause with the end of the journey. The roots may be growing where nobody can see them, including you. There is another truth worth carrying with you. Your life is not only shaped by the moments when you feel strong. Sometimes it is shaped even more by the moments when you continue despite feeling weak. Anyone can move forward when confidence is overflowing. The deeper question is this: who are you when certainty disappears? Who are you when no one applauds? Who are you when progress feels invisible? Those are the moments that quietly reveal your character. Not because you never doubt yourself, because you keep walking anyway. There is something beautiful about the fact that you cannot become tomorrow's version of yourself all at once. If you could, you would miss the wisdom hidden inside the process. Patience, humility, compassion, gratitude. These qualities rarely appear in people who have never struggled. They are usually born in those who kept choosing light, even while learning how to live with shadows. As you leave this journey, do not carry pressure. Carry awareness. Do not demand perfection from yourself. Offer yourself presence. Notice your thoughts without becoming them. Notice your emotions without letting them drive every decision. Notice your setbacks without calling them your identity. The goal was never to erase every difficult part of yourself. The goal was to become someone who can gently hold every part of themselves with honesty, wisdom, and courage. Perhaps the greatest sign of transformation is not becoming someone entirely new. It is finally feeling at home with the person you are becoming. Not because you have reached the end, because you no longer fear the road ahead. There will always be another lesson, another season, another challenge, another opportunity to choose who you wish to become. That is not something to fear. It is one of life's greatest gifts. You are not trapped inside one identity. You are not imprisoned by your past. You are not required to remain the person you needed to be in order to survive. Every sunrise quietly offers another invitation, not to become perfect, to become present. And presence, practice often enough, slowly becomes peace. If there is one thought worth carrying long after these words fade, perhaps it is this: your life does not change the day you stop falling. Your life changes the day you stop believing that every fall defines you. The strongest people are not those who never lose their way. They are the ones who keep returning to themselves with a little more wisdom, a little more kindness, and a little more courage each time. One quiet choice rarely changes a life, but thousands of quiet choices, made with love instead of fear, can transform an ordinary existence into something deeply meaningful. If this audiobook helped you understand yourself a little more deeply, and if these ideas gave you something valuable to carry into your own life, you can support Mindflow by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who may need these words today. Your support helps these conversations reach people who might be searching for exactly what you were searching for when you press play. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. Take good care of your mind. Be patient with your heart. Trust the quiet work that cannot yet be seen. And until we meet again for another Mindflow audiobook, goodbye.